Hello, and welcome to Stop Now, a social experiment enterprise where we stop, listen, and share. I am Nate, one of your hosts, and as you can clearly see, I am joined by a wonderful group of people this week for what I'm sure is going to be an excellent, interesting, and entertaining conversation. So, without any further ado, let me introduce my co-hosts, I guess. First of all, let's all welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, Cole White. Cole, it has been a minute since you and I have talked on one of these programs, and it is good to see you back, my friend.
Good to see you, Nate. Glad that everyone could show up. Part of my group. This is one of the side projects that I do. I also host the applied mathematical philosophers of a few different cities. But yeah, hopefully I'll bring logic and a little bit of interesting slant to this whole thing for them. But also glad to be here and glad to be talking about the issue today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And let me introduce our other co-host, somebody who is quickly becoming one of my favorite people to talk to. Savita is here. Savita, how are you?
I'm very well, Nate. How are you doing? It's a wonderful day, isn't it?
Yes, it is a wonderful day. I made it through another week on the job. So I'm wearing my green shirt today because green symbolizes growth. And I feel like I'm growing at this job. So it was a good week for me. And I'm happy to be here talking with you and everybody else, Savita. Uh, JK's
Hi.
somewhere around here. He's a man of mystery. So he may or may not pop up during this conversation that we're going to have. But Cole, you mentioned it. Like, we're going to talk about a very important topic today. So there he is, the man in the mask himself, JK. JK, how are you?
I'm good, Nate. Yeah, go ahead. These are guests and the audience.
Yes. And so I was going to pass the baton to Cole because, Cole, as you mentioned, this is a very important topic. So, why don't you let everybody out there watching know, who we've got gathered to speak on this subject this week.
Today we have Karl Berry. He's the founder and CEO of the Community Care Resource Council, working out of Dallas, Texas, doing a lot of outreach for the homeless community, people impacted by mental illness and addiction, and also has a basically nationwide network that he works with and provides services for across the country. So we wanted to bring him in. Karl, thanks for being here. And get his perspective a little bit about the homelessness issue that we're dealing with right now, the crisis after this recession that we had. Karl, thank you again for being here. What do you think about the homelessness crisis? Has it gotten worse as this recession has gone by?
Certainly, I believe it has. Again, my name's Karl Berry, and Community Care Resource Council works internationally, and we've got a lot of national fronts. We've been doing a lot of work in India and Africa lately, all of which do have their homeless issues, a lot of adverse childhood experiences, children without parents. There are places in Tanzania, places in Ghana, where there are 200 to 300 displaced children in communities. So yes, homelessness is alive and well, for a sick analogy. But the biggest thing I want to say is it's a personal opinion. Everything in my mind is maybe, so you're free to disagree. But maybe the world's societal woes is driven by mental health. I believe in mental health and I believe in spirituality, both of which are stigma words. Mental health does not necessarily mean catatonic or schizophrenic state. It just means poor thinking. And spirituality doesn't mean religion. It just means wholesome thinking. And so when we talk about homelessness, when we talk about mental health, when we talk about addiction, we're talking about poor thinking. I'm going to take poison for recreation. In fact, 12-step program says, came to believe that we had to be restored to sanity. It's the second step. So there, if you had to be restored, what does that mean? And then how many people are incarcerated because of a mental health situation? They're not a moral problem. It was a mental health problem. Racism is certainly mental health. That's poor thinking. Pornography, trafficking. We could go on and on and on, but it's just really about poor thinking. And so what I believe is happening is that we have let silos grow up around us. We don't share with each other. We don't intercommunicate. And because of that, all we end up with is more cultural confusion.
So you're a proponent that we of the idea that we should get back to the village in which we're all collaborating, communicating, and all have a say in our community, or maybe even a vote in our community. Are you a proponent of this type of collaboration within the community, or what is the solution you would say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. My solution, I believe, is communication. I went to a place years ago that I'm now comfortable in, but I arrived there a racist. And I was a racist because it was a choice of Malcolm X or Martin Luther King when I was a youngster. And, you know, Malcolm said they were white devils. And Martin said that we had to worry about peaceful solutions. And once we started talking to each other, we found out that maybe everybody has a point. And I believe maybe is the operative word for our societal woes. You know, maybe if we talk to these people and find out why they're racist, why they're involved in trafficking, what happened to them that made it think it was appropriate, why do you think and feel like you do? Our feelings are not our friends. And what we've got to understand is we get caught up in thinking that we understand and thinking that we know, but if we got a mental health problem, then we're thinking with defective co-material.
Yeah. So we do have a mixture of a mental health crisis and a community crisis. So what are the solutions? I mean, on a larger scale, do you work with national policy? Do you think that there is a route rather than just these like sort of putting out fires of charitable organizations and trying to work that way from the other end? Do you think that there is a national policy issue that should be raised?
Well, I don't know if it's putting out fires, Cole, as much as it is maybe lighting fires. Like I said, from my racist perspective, you know, I came out of 9/11 with some real bad thinking as it came to people of a certain race and culture. And now I'm finding out those very same people are some of the most loving, caring, and giving individuals, regardless of a religious persuasion. And what we're finding out is that we have misunderstanding, which is, again, lack of thinking, good thinking. We misunderstand, we misinterpret, we miscommunicate. There is no integration in thoughts in the society. I worked with an organization, the Critical Dialogue out of India, and they have some platforms. One is about education. They believe that we need to not lower the bar on our education, but raise the bar no matter how challenged or deprived the student is. They deal with cultural empowerment issues, particularly with women, and that the glass ceiling has long been a problem. And sometimes it's the people that are holding the ceiling up that's the problem, but it's also sometimes the people that are trying to break through the ceiling that's the problem. Sometimes I'm saying that I am my worst enemy. It's my thinking. I was a drug addict from the time I was 14 until I was 42 years old. And you know who the last person that took me to the drug dealer was? His name was Karl. I was the one that got me in trouble most of my life. And most of my life, there were two dogs, a good dog and a bad dog. And whichever one I felt fed the most was the one that won out. And so I had to understand that it's my thinking, it's me that is the ultimate problem. Flip Wilson said, the devil made me do it. And the devil's name was Karl.
Now, some people, Karl, have more of a mental health issue than I think you may have dealt with. Some people, it isn't a matter of thinking simply positively or negatively. It's a matter of a very severe kind of genetic or maybe societal result that is in their mind. It's not about thinking positively anymore. They can think as positively as they want and still be suffering the effects of their own suffering the effects of racism from the other end, or suffering the effects of sexism from the other side, or the effects of even mental health stigma for being depressed, for being hunched over and looking at the ground all the time. What do you think that is the necessity for their case when thinking positively doesn't necessarily work? And do you think that there's some sort of outreach that needs to happen that we're missing in society, or do you think it's just a charitable sort of cause?
Well, sometimes people think when you disagree, it's being negative, but I just believe I personally believe there's a thing is called perspective. And so my perspective is still the same. I believe that mental health is health. And so a lot of times it's the most simplistic things that are platforms to mental health, even if you are severely challenged, catatonic states, schizophrenic. A lot of that still deals with acting your way into right thinking. A lot of it deals with drinking plenty of water, getting plenty of sunshine, and doing the things that will make life better. No, is that going to solve the problem? No, but I deal with Andrew Calhoun. I deal with many of these brain health specialists, and all of them say the same thing. It's not just about finding the right cocktail. It's not just about trying to check the things off the box to diagnose what the problem is. It's about learning how to accept what the problems might be, learning that the problems that people are having are sometimes inflicted by people around them. So yes, they're not all self-inflicted. I agree with that. But I still believe that mental health is health, and sometimes the solution is simplistic in nature. I had to learn myself that COVID, I did a program called Sheltered Minds, and social distancing and stay-at-home protocols destroyed mindfulness. I went from my office to my recliner to my kitchen to my bed. I stopped going to the gym. I didn't get outside in sunlight. I didn't drink water. I drank Dr. Pepper. And all of the things that I was doing contributed to the problem. It didn't make a difference how severe the problem is. What is contributing to the problem is something that we have to do. And I don't mean to downplay that there are people that have severe problems, because they do. But a lot of times the severity of the problem can be diminished by the input of those people that are around each other and those people that are talking and those people that are innovative rather than those checking off the boxes and prescribing medicine as soon as you show up.
Mm.
So how do you propose that we start talking? Because sometimes these city council meetings or these neighborhood community association meetings can be quite vitriolic, or somebody stand up and then the rest of the crowd just boo them. I've been to some community or meetings that have been pretty contentious, just over the topic of homelessness. And people are pretty binary and polarized in either direction. How do you suggest that we start talking?
First of all, the first thing I suggest is we preference what we're about to say. A lot of times we will blurt out what our thoughts and our feelings are. And I told you our feelings, I don't believe, are our friends. So what we've got to say, this is not going to be popular. I don't necessarily even believe I'm right, but I think, and therefore I am. And so here's what I'm going to say. Don't hold this against me. It's a perspective. It's not a negative viewpoint. It is simply a viewpoint. And that's the things that is happening at these city council meetings. That's the thing that are happening at these religious discussions. That's the thing that's happening in the psychological and psychiatrists and the world of thinking. And we don't talk to each other. I don't talk to the people that I don't like. I don't like what they stand for because they burn crosses. But then again, I need to find out why they burn crosses. What happened to them? What made them think that way? I need to understand that for years I thought that, let's take racism. I thought that the white man was smarter than me because my skin was a certain color. You guys did programs because see, we're all victims of our ancestors' ancestors. So what was thought to be true 500 years ago, we've discovered is not true. There's a thing that they call epigenetics, and epigenetics is saying sometimes it's in our DNA that the misthinking that we have is problematic. Sometimes my granddaddy gave me bad information. He loved me, but he gave me bad information. And even Karl thinks that because your skin has less melanoma than mine, you're probably smarter than me. And I know that's a lie. I know that is illogical, but that still doesn't stop me from subconsciously thinking that way. My subconscious from 0 to 7 years old dictates my thought process. I don't start thinking logically until I'm 8 years old. I start thinking about logic then. I start thinking about the light at the end of the tunnel. I start thinking about karma. But all of that stuff is a happenstance and not necessarily total reality.
Now, what do you think about this? Because this is something that I kind of just playing around with, but the idea that, okay, so if we start thinking logically at a certain time when we're young, and we start to realize maybe that the world doesn't act logically, or that the world, it doesn't necessarily make total logical sense in that, you have, sort of governments that maybe say one thing or do another, or that they actually cause atrocities or something like that, or you have the police that are supposed to protect you, and yet you have these like evidences that are trying to be denied or sort of or stuff like that. Okay, you come from we ask you to mute your microphone until the end. Thank you very much. But yeah, what do you think about the fact that we come upon this world that doesn't make full logical sense, and so some people being at the whim of that most of that illogic say, well, if the world doesn't make sense, then I don't have to make sense. If the world's going to be illogical, then like I have to be illogical too in order to survive in it. Do you think that may be something that has the potential to be ameliorated in that regard, or do you think that I'm completely crazy?
No, I subscribe to a theory, an acronym called "We Have to Be Safe." SAFE for me is an acronym which stands for spirituality and faith empowers. And I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about intelligence and intellect. One of the reasons I take medication. I ate Jello before this show to put it on top of my ibuprofen that I had to take because I had to take my mental health meds. And my mental health is because I am so intelligent that my mind can fool me. See, an addict is living with an undercover agent. An addict takes drugs to get serotonin and dopamine, but guess what? Their mind craves serotonin and dopamine. So that means I'm living with an undercover agent. And what I mean by that is, let's look at Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is a perception from many different points of view. If you go to Wikipedia, I like Wikipedia. If you go to Wikipedia, Wikipedia says Black Lives Matter is about killing and racism among people of authority like police officers. And that Blue Lives Matter was about killing people that were cops. But what the thing is that some people think the solution to Black Lives Matter is all lives matter, but that's not the discussion. That's the misinterpretation of the discussion. We've got to understand what's it really all about, and then realize that we are smarter than most people will give us credit for, and that intelligence is also part of the problem. Because like with the drugs, my mind told me I needed to go get that stuff. I would wake up at 10 o'clock and I'd go to the dope house or the liquor store, not because I wanted liquor, but because it was 10 o'clock. And that's what I did at 10 o'clock. So I guess what I'm saying, Cole, for me, it's about being introspective. I got to look at myself. I can look at the world around me, and I can look at all of the other causes, but most of the causes is the way I respond rather than to react. I've got to learn how to come up with the proper response rather than to react, because reaction is when I think worldly. Reaction is when I want an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And that's reactionary. But what I have to learn how to do is to respond and to understand that proper response is better than negative reaction. And a lot of times, if we can come out of these silos, out of these racist silos, out of these pornography and trafficking and addiction and all of these other places, the stigma behind mental health, and come from out from under that and have people that, I know a guy that goes down to the homeless people twice a month. He goes down there, he takes a table, he sets up and eats with them and then shares with them for 3 to 5 hours twice a month. He knows their family heritage. He knows what kind of meds they take. He knows what kind of history they've got in the military. He is interacting with an association with. And I believe involvement is one of the things that we miss on planet Earth. We're not involved with each other. We're involved with people that think like us. And then people that don't think like us, we assume we know what Black Lives Matter means. But do we?
So, yeah, I have been reading this book. It's actually called The Art of Logic in an Illogical World. I don't know if that's backwards or not, by Eugenia Chang. And she actually talks about the Black Lives Matter misconception, basically, that someone's saying that someone says Black Lives Matter, and then another person says Blue Lives Matter. Well, they're not talking to each other, first of all. They're talking on placards or signs. So they're not communicating. And also, when one person says Black Lives Matter, another person says Blue Lives Matter, or another person says All Lives Matter, those aren't in disagreement. Do you know what I mean? That one person, if one person says Black Lives Matter and another person says Blue Lives Matter, well, I think that they're both sort of agreeing that, when one person says Black Lives Matter, they're not saying Blue Lives don't matter. That's not what they're saying. Or when some person says Blue Lives Matter, they're not saying Black Lives don't matter. Although it sounds very much to us like they are saying that, but we're putting them into a false perspective. And when somebody says all lives matter, well, then I think we're all in agreement that it's true, all lives matter. But that the term Black Lives Matter, the fact that it needs to be said is something that is what is sort of harping on our minds, that the fact that it even needs to be said, and also that it's being buried almost underneath all these other things. But everybody has concerns. But say it ends up falling into something like this. It's a diagram about these false dichotomies that people are put into just by, if someone says Black Lives Matter, then the other person feels like, wait, here, hold on. If somebody says Black Lives Matter, then the other person feels.
You muted.
Uh-oh.
You got muted, Cole.
Oh,
There you go. There you go.
Somebody says Black Lives Matter. Another person hears, well, like only Black Lives Matter. They put them into a false dichotomy. And then when they hear that Black Lives Matter, they hear that some lives don't matter. And so they want to say all lives matter. And then when we hear all lives matter, we hear that Black lives don't matter. You know what I mean? Because of this false dichotomy, these binary and polarized thinking that we're forced into while thinking illogically. What do you think about logic being the sort of the linchpin, or the sort of a saving, a point of saving this whole thing? Do you think it might work? Is it part of your good thinking?
I agree with you 138%. You're actually helping make my point, because you used the T word, thinking. Remember, I said mental health is bad thinking. You talked about sounds like. You talked about the dichotomy. And somebody thinks there's a problem with Black lives and blue lives and all lives, and there's not a problem. That's just what you just said. It's in our heads. It's our thinking. It's our lack of communication. It's a lack of integrative conversation. It's a lack of honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. It's a lack of understanding the dictionary. So much confusion between hope and wishing. People go to the 7-Eleven, they buy a lottery ticket, and they hope they win, and that's not hope. Hope is when desire meets expectation. Hoping they win is wishing. That's not hope. So we got to understand that we don't have the correct definitions. And guess what? If we have the wrong definition, how can our thinking help but be impaired?
Yeah, the false dichotomy thing is almost like trivial equivalent to somebody saying, I like Mozart, and another person saying, well, I don't really like Mozart. And then the first person then going, well, why don't you like Mozart? I mean, does that mean like that I'm wrong for liking Mozart or whatever, or something like that? That basically somebody says, oh, I don't think Mozart's very good. And then somebody like takes offense to it, almost as if they feel like they're offended because they like Mozart or something. Whereas music just hits the ear to people, you know what I mean? People react kind of like, basically to music. I mean, who knows, there's been a lot of studies, but like why we like the music we like is just, it's arbitrary, and to take so much like personal stake in it, it's almost like we are controlled a little bit politically as well. We don't know why, and so we take a lot of stock in these political beliefs, but the fact that we don't know the base foundation of them means that we get angry when people contradict them. You know, we wouldn't get angry if we knew the whole reason why. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, this is me going off. This is me going off. But I think we're on the same chart with the good thinking thing. Now, there have been certain issues or certain concepts raised, like neighborocracy.
Paul,
Or
can I jump in and ask a question?
Tabitha, please.
To speak as well.
Perfect timing. Perfect timing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Cole. I thought it's not going to stop, so I thought I have to jump in here. Yeah, thank you, and sorry. So, Karl, I'd like to just know about your organization and your work that's been doing on this for all your tenure. CCRC, how do you say about it? You said you're going to have new projects in India and Africa and all that. What has been the project that you've done so far?
One of them was a learning aspect that says Teacher to Master. And Teacher to Master is a program that is meant to combat education that took place during COVID. And everybody pointed fingers at everybody else. The school board pointed at the teachers, the students pointed at the teachers, and the parents pointed at the teachers. And the key issue is this. Pedagogy was driven in the past by one teacher teaching multiple subjects to multiple age students in one class. And they had to individualize the teaching and the training. And so now what we're trying to do with Teacher to Master is to get teachers to understand that we don't want a lesson plan that tries to teach the same thing to everybody, but we want to convince the student that they care. They want to convince the student that I want to reach you, I want to deal with you, I want to help you. I spoke to Dallas Workforce Solutions, and there's a workforce solution in every major city in the United States, over 100,000 people. And one of the things we talked about was in Dallas, there are 459,000 people without a high school education. And the reason they don't have that education is multiple. Adoption and foster care is one of the biggest things in the United States. And I just did a program for Texas Health and Human Services on that subject. So to answer your question, I think we've got to agree to disagree. What we deal with is trying to deal with helping other people. I have a program that is aimed at recidivism, lowering returning citizens rates. And in that program, I've got a guy that has created an app, and he's created 3 different penitentiaries that are allowing the prisoners to do coding and let the money go not to the prison, but to the prisoner. And so when he's released, guess what? He takes $5,000 to $10,000 with him, and he's got a job waiting on him because he's been coding for 3 years. So again, what we try to do is to attack the norms of society and find out what we can do, how we can communicate, and what we can do to overcome the traditional barriers that have always been in the way. And those barriers mostly centered, unfortunately, Savitha, around money. They don't want to give me money. I deal with awareness. What I do is I do events that are designed to impact, inspire, inform, and improve. And they don't want to give me money for that because data can't be analyzed. They can't do what they call evidence-based thinking. But guess what? It's only through thinking that people are going to change. So you asked me a question, and I went around the corner and down the block and back to tell you, but in the end, I think is important to impact thinking. I think that it's important to do awareness. In addition to doing an event every other month, I have a weekly radio and a weekly TV podcast. So if you do an event with me and you are really good, I'm going to come back to you, Savitha, after we finish this thing on recidivism. I want to interview you on the TV show.
Oh, sure. Why not?
Yeah.
I would be able to talk about mental health. I had some, I would not call that issues. Maybe, I don't know if it's a taboo to talk. Maybe after my babies, we had the postmortem and the kind of the depression, the lows and the winters, how it is. You rightly said about the sunshine. We have to take the vitamin D's and things like that. So when this topic is seen as a taboo and homelessness, of course, we have other audiences also this time. I'm surprised that do they want to introduce themselves or talk about it or what they expect from this show?
I didn't
We
catch
have
the question.
Sagar,
What's the
Michaela.
question?
I'm just asking if there's audience are going to talk or going to say hello or what they feel about this topic.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Otherwise,
Well,
I have
we were kind of we didn't get to the Q&A yet. I guess we can do that whenever you want. But yeah, we were sort of just finishing up with Karl until we get to the Q&A, and it looks like everybody's pretty much stuck around to maybe ask a question or just to see where the discussion's going. So we may want to get to that.
Okay.
Karl, what do you think? You want to answer a little questions?
Well, I just want to bring up one thing.
Okay.
And then I think it's time for some questions because I'm tired of talking. I don't like
Yes, sir.
listening to myself because I realize this fool named Karl can get in the way of Karl. There's a thing in therapeutic psychology called motivational interviewing. Motivational interviewing is to try to lead a person to make critical thoughts and decisions and not try to influence their thinking. So I ask you, what do you think about sunshine? And then you say, well, I think it's orange. The sun comes up in the morning and the sky is orange. But what happens if it's cloudy? It's going to be gray. But I don't argue that point. So I repeat, oh, so you think the sun is orange. Okay. And what does that do? That exudes trust. I start repeating to you, back to you, what you're saying. Repeat back to you what you're thinking. Let you know that I hear you. I see what you say. And then rather than to tell them the sky is gray, what I do is I tell them, I said, well, let me ask you this. If it's raining, is the sky still orange? Well, they got to stop and think now. I'm not interviewing or putting out there my thoughts. I'm just asking you to think. And I think that's what we need to do in today's world. I think we need to look at trying to convince people, number one, that I'm hearing you, I'm listening to you, and then ask you, what do you think? Come out of the silo and let's communicate with one another.
Yeah. I think the problem with our interview is that we agreed upon so many things, despite being from such a different backgrounds. Yeah, I appreciate you being here. Let's see if we can. If you want to answer some questions, I can answer some. I mean, I've been talking with Karl and one of his therapists that he has. Rusty McClen, I believe is his name.
That's it.
And just a great guy. And you know, I was really kind of very skeptical of this positive thinking thing. And you know, turned out that Rusty talks about how we are all basically adrenaline junkies, and that our minds focus on things that will reinforce our need for adrenaline rather than the things that will calm us down and ease our minds. So that basically we become these story junkies. Basically, we're looking for a very exciting story, whereas we're keeping ourselves very anxious and nervous when we should be doing things that keep us more, you know, sane and calm. But yeah, I mean, I'm just starting to learn more about it. But if anybody had some questions for me or for anybody, feel free. Let's see. people want to put their hand up or just
Yep.
go ahead.
Let's see. I believe there's a button everybody can access. Just raise your hand like we back in school, and we'll call on you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Your Community Care Resource Council, which age group do they, especially for the mental health, which age group do they actually target? Because I think we have to catch them young when it comes to mental health. Even a 7-year-old or a 9-year-old can get into depression. It could be schools or sports, but there are different categories. So how to deal with this, to say the therapy is okay, how to deal with if they see a domestic violence and all this, which category do you focus most?
We focus on the whole gambit, but you're absolutely right. With the homeless population in Dallas, one of the things that's important to note is that 38% of the people that are homeless in Dallas that are under the age of 18 are there because of religious bias from their family. They've been put out because they don't think like they want them to think. And my question then becomes, who's got the thinking problem? Is it the homeless teen or the parent that's putting them out? So yes, it's always about the youth. I did a program called It Takes a Village, and somebody talked about that earlier. And I think we always got to look to our youth because that's where our future lies. I believe song says children are our future.
Right. So we have Mr. Amjol has the next question. So you can shoot your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Go on.
Yes.
I just forgive me. I'm a little bit ignorant about homelessness. I used to be more familiar with it maybe 20 years ago, but just what's going on, and perhaps in since Karl, you're from Dallas. I've been through Dallas. Now, I'm sure there are various causes of homelessness, but in your experience, Karl, can you just kind of narrow down maybe what you take to be the salient conditions or maybe the salient causes of homelessness that you think are the primary causes?
Well, I don't want to be overly simplistic, but I believe the primary causes of most of the problems on planet Earth are thinking. It's mental. There are a lot of people homeless. There's a homeless community in one of the organizations I work with, and those people don't want to take their meds. And the community was trying to make them take their meds. And what we have learned is that you don't try to make them take their meds. You let them make their own choices. We got to let people make their own mistakes. And so for me, a lot of the times it's letting people do what they think they want to do, and to let them, through like motivational thinking techniques, try to lead them toward critical thinking and not for trying to control or dictate their thinking. That's that dichotomy Cole talked about. So I really believe that with the homeless community, what I see mostly the problem becomes with the thinking and the people trying to dictate people's thinking rather than to allow them to think for themselves and to try to help them whether they're doing what you think they should do or not. If they're hungry, we need to feed them. Churches are real bad about this. They want to tell you how to get baptized, how to speak in tongues, how to do all these things, but people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. If I'm hungry, feed me. I don't care about what you believe. Give me a hamburger. And that's what I think that we miss. We don't want to care for people unless they do what we think they need to do. And that is bad thinking.
Can I just follow up? I just want to just make sure if I'm understanding what you're saying. I would agree that thinking is, gets lot of people in trouble and problems from anywhere from all sorts of issues. But would you say the cause is this the choices that people are making primarily, or do you think it's because you seem to be, it's a little bit unclear in my mind. Do you think that it's the conditions that people are in that puts them without a home, or is it our institutions, or is it a combination of things that, or is it this issue of issues concerning drugs or addictions? So I would agree with you that thinking is such a it's a necessary condition, for people to be somewhat healthy. But problematic thinking can arise in all sorts of areas, and not just in homelessness. So maybe you can help me out a little bit more, clarifying something about specifically to homelessness.
But for me, it's the decisions I come to based on my thinking. Like I said, I was a drug addict. I got high at age 14 on a Wednesday night, and I got high all day, every day for the next 28 years. Mm. And I thought that I could stop anytime I wanted to. I just didn't want to. All of that is about thinking. And it's the decisions I make based on my thoughts that sometimes, and for my case, I believe most of the time, but please understand, Angel, that my belief is this: maybe is the most important word on the planet. Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong. Possibly Nate's right, but he could be wrong. And what I've got to understand, as long as I'm in the middle and the extreme left and the extreme right are the same distance from where I am, then maybe I can learn, maybe I can change my mind, maybe I can understand. What we get caught up with is being right. And being right is not all it's cracked up to be. That's my personal opinion. And I may be wrong.
As we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Karl, on a previous episode, I believe we had this discussion, Savita. Like there's also a difference between being right, being factually right, and also being just. Like there can be a difference in that.
Right, and also they could be, you say thinking. It also means maybe awareness or lack of ignorance and things like that. So when you tell me a story about your 14-year-old and about 2 decades after, we can. I don't want to blame on anybody, but we could always talk about the system, the teachers, the educational system, the family system. There's so many factors that has impact like this. Of course, it's a big topic. It's an ocean by itself. Mental health itself is like it's an ocean, and homelessness is it's a topic that because of this happened and this and that. It's like pointing fingers. Well, of course, we have another hand raised. If I'm spelling it right, or Neriman Sagar. Yes, shoot your question, please. You're on mute. You're trying to speak.
Well, I was deliberately being mute because I'm curious about what other people think, especially about that question. I think that's the problem. If it's all Karl's input, then that's the problem. It needs to be, all of the silos need to be heard. Nate, Neriman, Lisa, we need to hear what each other has to say, because the truth is somewhere in between what Stephen is thinking and what I'm thinking and what we're all thinking. And that the problem is thinking, then we've got to look at all of our thoughts and try to find out where the solution may lie. So what does anybody else think about Savitha's question?
Drives up. Did you see my house? Hello?
Yes.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, go on, please.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, go on. We can hear you.
Oh, it's just a bad.
He's got a bad connection.
Yes.
All right. So
That's communicate, as Karl mentioned earlier, Savita. Communication is important. When we can't communicate, we can't, find out what everybody's thinking.
right.
I'm just liking Karl's. The idea that we should all chip in to the idea instead of relying on Karl for really just the number one input. I think is a great concept, and I'm in agreement with that for sure. And but the good thinking aspect of it, I believe that people are at the same time more at risk, or more in a more vulnerable population sometimes, when they are victims of like child abuse. They are in foster care, or that they had a poor like growing up experience, or like drugs were present more so than in other people's childhoods, or things like that. They're just we're socialized into different groups, and we unfortunately become homeless for reasons that basically we grew up differently. And I think that we should be accepted for being who we are, rather than necessarily being told to think more positively or differently, and so to change ourselves all the time. I think sometimes these people who are in a position of more vulnerable positions, and people who are experiencing houselessness, sometimes are the most creative individuals in society. Unfortunately, they're incentivized to having to steal in order to eat. You know what I mean? Because playing music on the street doesn't pay enough. Yeah, I believe that to be at least sometimes, maybe not always the case, but
Sorry to interrupt. So the devil arrives here. The time is 12, and it's almost an hour.
Yeah, that hour flew by.
Get consensus like with everyone if they are okay to go for a few more minutes. Karl, I know I just want to honor the commitment, and also you might be busy. So if you are okay with it, we can go ahead and ask for a few more questions. And I will always say that I'm the devil, so I'm making it sound like I'm a bit harsh on it. Karl, Amol asked that question. So for that, I had this opposite side of thinking, saying that homeless people deserve this. They have to be homeless because of their attitude, because there are so much of resource there to help people, but still they are so arrogant. And they say that I have this issue, my thinking is like this, so you deserve, then be in the streets. Who cares? When people are trying to help you, provide you some facility, if you are not ready to accept that, then you deserve. What else can I say? I might sound arrogant or stupid, but that's the fact, right? If you are an orphan, you don't have anybody to help you, how do basically people end up in streets? That's my question. Because we have institutions, we have resources to help people. There are so many non-profits, right? And nobody wants to give free food to you, right? If I'm going to give food, and there are again, I don't want to bring up as a third world country, there are people, beggars in the street. They choose to live their life like that. What anyone can do. Again, if you are saying that they are seriously mentally ill, they have to be institutioned, right? That is why we have mental asylums. Why that is not happening? Where is the fault remains? Can we address those things rather than superficially, hypothetically discussing and saying oh, it's all about the thinking? Everybody damn has the same kind of thinking, right? What is wrong here? We are not addressing that exact problem.
I'm going to go to the drug addict. A lot of times, people get mad at the drug addict because they suffer a moral dilemma. They steal, they sell their bodies, they do all sorts of negative things because they find in ways and means to get more. But is it a moral dilemma or is it a mental dilemma? Do you get mad at cancer victims because they got cancer? And that's, to me, is the place that the dividing line has to be drawn. Is they getting what they deserve, or are they getting all that they can because they don't know no better, because they're not morally foul, they're mentally sick. Their thinking is bad. And so, yes, it's overly simplistic, but is it because do you get what you deserve, or do you deserve to get what the consequences are? I mean, a lot of times I've been told by the mental health specialists, we need to let the people that refuse to take their meds go without meds. That's human respect. And the outcome of that is bad for them. But then again, I know a lot of people that don't want to go. I know a guy that chooses to live in his car because he doesn't want to live in a place where the lady lets people share rooms. He wants to have his own privacy. He's got a right to choose, regardless of his condition. And so, yeah, that might be overly simplistic. But again, I still go back to my major premise. I think thinking is the source of the dilemma. We've got to look at the way we think, even if the way we think is they get what they deserve. We've got to look at that too.
If I could just jump in really quick, unless Joel, you wanted to, if you had a question you wanted to ask.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead, Cole. It's okay. I'd rather hear what you have to say.
Okay, thank you. I heard someone tell me a story about how they were beaten when they were growing up by their mom, by his mom, and that his brothers did the same thing as he was growing up. And his brothers were addicted to heroin, and he, you know, like suffered the, you know, emotional and physical abuse growing up. And he said that he remembered the first time he did heroin, he got sick, like really sick. He didn't like it at all. He said, but it made me stop thinking about the pain of my childhood. And he said he kept doing it again and again. He's like, and it didn't even really work. It just made me sick. But it was another pain on which to focus that could distract from the other pain. And then, you know, of course, it started becoming more and more enjoyable. And then, you know, being stuck in a lifestyle of, you know, having to commit crimes in order to sustain the habit. So basically, that it wasn't even like that enjoyable to him, although it was addicting as hell. So it's this really weird conundrum or opposites situation in which something that makes you sick also makes you better. And you know, only someone, I think, in this situation where their life growing up was hell, or felt really a victim of their situation, can really feel that, you know, making themselves a victim, you know, basically makes them feel comfortable. I don't know really how to explain that, but I don't know if it's good thinking as much as it is or a problem of good thinking, or if it is just a problem of how to correct that issue once it's already been started. So like I said before, putting out fires. But Karl, you're saying light the fires. So I don't know. I think we're agreed in some regards, and also, also some people are more vulnerable, but we got to respect everybody's perspective really in this, don't we? In order to address everything, even if it's the devil's perspective. But yeah. If anybody else had any questions, Karl, did you guys want to leave it there? We're kind of near the end. We're at the end.
The end for now, I would say, Cole, because I do think this is a important discussion to have, an important conversation. And I guess the last thing I'll say, and it's something I think Savita and I talked about with a guest a few weeks ago, is when you're in a situation like that, or a situation dealing with drugs, or a situation where you've been abused, or been a victim of human trafficking, you're in a survival mindset. And people in survival mindsets do what they have to do to get through that day, to get through that moment. And so it's all a matter of, and I think, Karl was speaking to this earlier, how do we get from that mindset of survival, that mindset of getting through the day, that mindset of surviving, to how am I thriving? How am I living my best life? How am I being all that I can be? And that's the $1 million question for all of us. How do we get to that level where we're better, better today than we were yesterday, better a year from now than we were a year ago? And I don't have the answers. Like Karl said, I'm just gonna sit right here in the middle on Maybe Boulevard, and we'll see where the conversation can go.
All right.
So if anybody else have any final thoughts? Savita?
Yes, I was in the mute, sorry. And also we have to think a lot of why questions, why homelessness, why bad thinking. We have to just find the root cause of all this. Once we find the root cause, then we can work backwards, or we can work front on this case. So when we keep talking about this addiction and homelessness, why, and under 18 is the majority here. So we have a lot of data here, but how do we find the root cause, and how do we decrease it by the time? So that's because we have to see results in this case. Yeah. So I think we have made a lot of kind of an awareness, because I was not very sure about this homelessness and under 18. It's shocking for me. So it was just eye-opening for some of the facts that you shared with us, Mr. Karl. So is there any other questions? Otherwise, we have to close this wonderful conversation. We have to come back another time on this.
I just had a simple kind of, I think that's, looking at homelessness, to particular homelessness people or to particular cases is a good way to look at it too. But I tend to think that homelessness, if it's in fact a problem, some people might think homelessness is not a problem, but if it is in fact a problem, then it seems to be a community problem. And it seems to be our problem, not just any particular. So I tend to look at it as, what does it mean to be a healthy community? If we can ask that question, what we want to see in our community, then it seems to me that homelessness would be some part of that project of saying, well, we just want people to live the best lives in conditions where they can thrive. And it's very hard to do that when you're living on the streets.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I see it. I see it as a community issue, despite the fact that I agree with what's been said about individual thinking, teaching critical thinking, perhaps even at high school level or junior high, formally teaching critical thinking skills like logic and use of reasons and fallacies, and being concerned about rhetoric and all this sort of stuff. Extremely important. But gosh, it seems to me there's something about what we can do as a community that recognizes when people make mistakes. Really, do they deserve to be homeless? I mean, we all make mistakes, but does that mean that we should be on the streets? That seems, I don't know, to me, there seems something like that seems like something to be concerned about.
It's not an either or thing. You know, my dad always tells me whenever I have an issue, like it's not an either or, it's an all and. Like it's personal responsibility, but also, as you know, Karl mentioned earlier, like what are the churches doing? What is the community doing? What is the village doing? So it takes both. It takes all, you know, and then that would be where I think, like not just with homelessness, but with most problems, there's got to be an element of what is the individual doing, what is the individual choosing, what is the individual thinking, but also what is the community doing? Because we're all in this together at the end of the day. And if we didn't learn that from last year, then I don't know if we're ever going to learn that as a society, that we're all connected.
Many hands make light work.
There you go, Cole.
Spread the word, everybody.
Yes.
All
So
right.
that's going to do it for this episode. I want to thank everybody, but in particular, we want to thank Karl. Karl, if you want to shout out your contact information where anybody can listen to your show or watch your show or get in touch with all of the great work you're doing, Karl, you know, the floor is yours right now.
Well, thank you. You can reach me at our website is usccrc.com. We've got an 800 number. We've also got it's 1-888-464-2488. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. All of it centered around USCCRC. And I just want to thank everyone for the opportunity to bump my gums and understand that I really am not an expert. I'm just another bozo on the bus. And so I thank everybody for being here, for your input, and hugs.
You're real, buddy.
Yes, thank you so much, Karl. Thank you, Cole, for you know, bringing this together and having this conversation with us this week. Good to have you back, my friend. Savita, thank you as always for joining us. JK, the man in the mask, everybody that was in attendance and everybody that asked questions this week, and for you, yes, you, the people watching, thank you so much. Go to stop-now.org for more information on what we do or to find out how you can support our mission. But as JK always says, our time is up. It is time to stop now. And we'll see you next time, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a nice day.
Okay.